Hello, strangers and scrufftards. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And in this video, we will be taking a look at small armored units tactics in Ukraine and how drones and trenches have dictated armored warfare in Ukraine. And more specifically, how it has affected Russian armored warfare. So we have seen throughout 2024 Russia trying to assault across fields with only a couple of vehicles or one or two turtle tanks. And when they are hit, Russian soldiers dismount in huge numbers, almost comical numbers. And people are wondering, why isn't Russia attacking with larger formations? Are they running out of vehicles? And why is every vehicle crawling with soldiers? And I figured we would start things off with taking a look at a turtle tank assault that goes wrong. So we have two turtle tanks that are moving down this path here, right next to a windbreak, a wood tree line, or whatever it is. And these are like Mad Max vehicles. And when you look at the video, it doesn't look real. It looks like it's science fiction. It's really weird. But they're moving down this path along the tree line. And then the lead turtle tank moves up close to a couple of wrecks here. You can see here, these are destroyed vehicles, two or three of them. So quite clearly, something is going on over here. But the Russians over here, they are fine with it. They have orders. They need to move on, and move on they do. And they make their way around the wrecks, and sure enough, hits a mine, and it's a big explosion. The turtle tank is immobilized and rendered useless. And sure enough, what happens? Well, you have a bunch of troops. I mean, easily a dozen, if not more, dismounting from the turtle tank within the armored shed. They jump off and run straight back to the other turtle tank because right now they don't want to be here. This is a minefield. And they link up with troops from the other turtle tank, and they too jump out for some reason. This turtle tank is intact, but everyone jumps out, and they all link up in the woods here trying to find cover. And this is what we're seeing, right? This is what Ukraine wants us to see, these turtle tanks failing. I mean, there's a reason why they are promoting these videos, why they are going viral. It is because Ukraine wants them to go viral. At the same time, we know that Russia is steadily advancing all across the front line, taking massive casualties while doing so. And this is the reason why they are taking massive casualties. They are sending turtle tanks and other vehicles across minefields and stuff like that, and this shit happens. But they're still advancing, so that means some of these vehicles and some of these troops, they are getting across, right? And they are taking the fight to the Ukrainians. So during the Ukraine summer offensive of 2023, the Ukrainians learned pretty quickly that Russian drones could spot all larger concentrations of forces, which allowed Russia to prepare all defensive measures needed. And to counter this, Ukraine had to adapt and adopt new tactics, and they adopted smaller units that would not be as easily detected by Russian drones, and that became the norm. So 2 to 3 vehicles and 8 to 16 troops, maybe 24 soldiers at most, would advance and attack key sections of Russian positions. And now in 2024, Russia faces the same challenges. Large concentrations of forces are easily detected by Ukrainian drones and lets Ukraine prepare all defensive measures needed. Russia has been forced, just like Ukraine, to attack with only 2 to 3 vehicles to catch the defenders off guard. But, just like for the Ukrainians, this leaves Russia with only 2 or 3 squads of infantry being able to attack. And if you attack with 3 squads, you realistically can only reliably defeat 1 enemy squad. So how then can you hope to attack at all? So the absolute basics of infantry tactics or tactics in general is that you strive to have a 3-to-1 advantage in any given firefight as a rule. And when you go up against prepared defenses, bunkers, trench lines, you need a 5-to-1 advantage. And when you're fighting in an urban setting and going on the offensive, attacking buildings and what have you, then you need a 10-to-1 advantage. And the reason is obviously to bring more guns than the enemy. It also allows you to take more casualties, or it allows you to take casualties and still be able to succeed. You may lose a couple of guys, but you still have enough troops to win the firefight. And with the more troops you have, you can cover as many angles as possible. You can secure your flanks. And in a forest, you only have 2 flanks. If you're fighting in trenches, zigzagging, there are bunkers all over the place, it becomes more difficult to cover all the angles. It also becomes more difficult to assault, and you will take more casualties. And then you enter into an urban setting, and then you have thousands of angles you need to prepare and or you need to cover, and there are thousands of places where the enemy can ambush you, so you will take tons and tons of casualties. So that is why you need the 10-to-1 advantage. You need to have more guns than the enemy to suppress them. You need to be able to cover all the potential angles that you can be shot at from, and you will take casualties. So you need all these troops, additional troops, just to be able to handle the casualties and still push on and win the firefight. If you attack with 2 squads of 18 soldiers in total, you can only expect to effectively defeat a unit of 6 enemies. At most, you can YOLO it and defeat maybe 20 enemies if you want to plan for a successful mission. But if those 6 enemies are in trenches, you need 30 soldiers to defeat them if you want to plan for a successful mission. So if you rush across a field with 2 transports carrying 18 soldiers on a mission that requires 30 troops, you know it will be a tough fight. Now, add in drones, artillery, mortars, ATGMs, and machine guns, and I think we begin to understand why this war is moving so slowly for both sides. First, you need to be able to outsmart the drones, and then you need to run the gauntlet across fields while getting hammered by artillery, drones, and missiles. And then, at the end, you will be in a gunfight where the enemy has the advantage. So how can you be effective in this scenario? Unsurprisingly, Russia came up with a very Russian approach. I believe it was Andrew Perpetua that showed us this video of a Russian tank that got hit, cope shed, and then it just became satire almost. You can see here all the Russians that came piling out of this tank after it got hit. It's just hilarious. Look at this. It's just silly, right? But there is logic to the insanity. Trust me. So Russia and Ukraine can only conduct assaults with 2 to 3 vehicles due to all the drones. But they can't conduct useful assaults against trenches with only 16 to 18 troops. So Russia puts 20 to 25 soldiers on each vehicle, because if they get across, you are now assaulting with 50 soldiers instead of 18. And with 50 soldiers, you stand a greater chance of success. You can overrun an enemy position, and you can even potentially push on. You still have the problem that 50 troops can only reliably attack 10 enemies holding a trench line, but it is still a more effective assault in the end. So just imagine the tank here with all of these troops, right? It got hit and they had to dismount in the middle of a field, and they probably got hit with cluster munitions afterwards, would be my guess. But what if the tank was not destroyed? Remember, Russia has been gaining ground for a couple of months all along the front line. What if they made it across? And all of a sudden, these guys, they're not running across a field trying to avoid getting hit. They are now doing this, rushing into a trench line. And you have 2 of those tanks, maybe 3. And the tanks, they can still shoot. Yes, the turret can't swing around, but you can still move the tank. You can still aim. You can still fire at the rest of the Ukrainian positions, isolating a section of the trench line, allowing your 30, 40, or 50 troops to rush in and attack how many? 10, 20 Ukrainians? There is some logic to this insanity, right? If you get across, you begin to see the merits of these tactics. When they get caught in the open, it just looks stupid, right? But if they get across, if the tanks can begin to open fire, and if all of these guys are rushing into enemy trenches instead of running wildly across the field trying not to get hit, it's not so comical anymore. It makes complete sense. Russia is making gains all along the front line, potentially because they are overrunning Ukrainian positions, relying on these tactics, getting as many troops as possible across the open fields on as few vehicles as possible to avoid being detected by the drones. But one can't help wonder why they're not using BMPs. A tank is strong enough to carry big cope sheds, so that may be it. Turtle tanks may be considered more effective for transporting large amounts of soldiers, carrying these makeshift armored sheds. But there is also a real chance that Russia is actually starting to run out of armored transports, and that they have no choice but to convert their tanks into makeshift assault vehicles. And if Russia is running out of transports and are forced to modify tanks because they lack vehicles, despite being effective, this could signify that Russia is slowly losing this war. And we're moving on to charge of the Light Brigade, where we have motorbikes and golf carts instead of horses. And I guess everyone who is watching is aware that for a couple of months now, Russia has been more and more been relying on motorcycles and golf carts, quad vehicles, to make smaller assaults and stuff like that. It's not that strange relying on these vehicles, even on a modern battlefield. They do fill the role of a modern cavalry force, essentially. They work very well for reconnaissance and communication, bring in messages and notes between units, especially when radio signals are jammed, as they are down in Ukraine. They allow units to rapidly deploy or redeploy as needed. And you can use them to quickly move into position to harass and ambush the enemy as they maneuver. And they also provide simple logistics. You can put ammunition and water and food and what have you into the golf carts or onto a motorbike and just drive fast as hell to a position, unload it, and then get the hell out of Dodge. And you can also rely on them for medevacs. Put a wounded guy onto these small vehicles and then get him quickly out of harm's way. And I mean, cavalry is used to this day by various armies, including United States, China, and the image here shows the Portuguese military doing cavalry exercises in North Africa during their colonial wars in the 60s. So you have here cavalry units, modern day, with G3 battle rifles and pistols and what have you. So yes, cavalry fills a role even on a modern battlefield, and Russia has just swapped the horse for motorbikes and quad vehicles. Now, we've all heard the And the stories of Russia doing all-out assaults with these vehicles when they are basically driving up to the front line, go through a breach in the windbreaks, and then try and cross the big open fields, attacking Ukrainian positions. And we quite often see them failing doing this. And this is obviously because Ukraine wants us to see these videos, these failed attacks. And I mean, yeah, just as you wouldn't rely on horses to do a cavalry charge against trench lines in a modern day war, it's a bad idea to do it with motorbikes. But if say that this here is the battlefield and Ukraine and Russia is firing at each other across this field, this distance here, that's roughly 200 meters. So this is your average size battlefield. Then you can rely on motorbikes and quad bikes to move up and down behind the front line, bringing in food, water, ammunition, picking up wounded and bringing them out and stuff like that very effectively. And you can also, if you have an opportunity, rely on, say you have the motorbikes, they're fast as hell, and just dash across. Like I said, this is 200 meters. Dash across, get into position and outflank the enemy as they're overwhelmed on the edge here on the flank, and then you can start to push them back away from this tree line, for instance. Not unreasonable, not unthinkable. It's what you could have done using an APC or a IFV. This is essentially all about speed and surprise and moving across an open area in short order. And, you know, motorbikes work very well for that purpose. And if you want to get, you know, a bit risky, same thing, move around the enemy and take up position behind them. If you see an opportunity, use speed, surprise to dash across and get in behind the enemy. Don't directly assault them like guys pointed out down here. Move around them, right? Use these as cavalry. Move around the enemy. Find a good position where they are not looking, where they don't have as much firepower, and get around and set up position to outflank them and stuff like that. So these vehicles, they do serve a purpose, and I think Russia may have found a use for them on the modern battlefield, even if Ukraine likes to point out every time these vehicles fail, and they fail impressively so as well when Ukraine shows us these videos when they're bombing these vehicles to hell and back. Now, crucially, Russia appears to use motorbikes quite effectively during dusk or dawn, assaulting with 2 or 4 bikes, and each bike has 2 soldiers each. And a raid at dawn is, I mean, it's the classic tactical move, and it has been used for thousands of years. So Russian motorbikes appears to be somewhat effective in conducting these classic morning raids when the Ukrainians are tired, they haven't really woken up yet, and all of a sudden 2, 3, 4 motorbikes just dash across a field. All of a sudden you have 8 Russian soldiers not that far away from you throwing hand grenades, firing RPG rounds, and either they set up shop and take over your position, or they go back to their motorbikes and drive straight back across the field, right? So basically a cavalry raid on a very small scale. And these tactics appears to work for the Russians. So I don't think we should dismiss these vehicles or these tactics, because, you know, Russia is advancing. They are losing a ton of guys doing it, but they are advancing. So whatever they're doing, some of it seems to be working. So yes, Ukraine like to show us the videos when these motorbikes and quad vehicles mess things up and just drive straight into machine gun fire or artillery shells and what have you. But there will be times when these vehicles do perform according to plan, and apparently Russians are having success using motorbikes and stuff like that for morning raids. And I think we should remember that against a BTR or a BMP, one drone can kill 3 crew and 8 to 20 troops, depending on how many are riding on top of the vehicle. Against a motorcycle or golf cart, one drone can only kill 2 or 3 guys, 6 at most. Same thing is true if these vehicles detonate a mine. What the motorcycles and golf carts cannot handle is obviously machine guns and incoming artillery, as Ukrainian drone videos have proven. So if they are to be effective, there is a time and place to put them into action, like a morning raid, like we just pointed out. Charging trench lines head-on might not be the best idea, but if the opportunity arises, maybe you can send 6 or 12 guys into an advantageous position to outflank the enemy, if only to launch a couple of RPG rounds before heading back to safety. And Russia has been advancing of late, despite these weird choices of vehicles put to the use on the front line. Russian casualties are high, but they are gaining ground nonetheless. But with a little bit of luck, Russia is forced to rely on these vehicles because they are indeed running out of proper transports. Poland put up a tough fight against the Germans in 1939, relying on cavalry against German tanks. The Polish used the horses as trucks, basically, to quickly relocate forces and heavy guns, dismounted at distance from the fight, and then proceeded on foot into battle, just like any modern force would do if riding in an APC. An all-out frontal attack might not be the best usage of motorbikes and quad vehicles, but they can allow infantry to quickly redeploy when an opportunity presents itself, or when reinforcements needs to be moved around quickly. If used as light cavalry, these vehicles can fill a role on the Mad Max-style battlefields of Ukraine, but they probably should not be used to assault enemy positions directly. And that's all I have for you this time around. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. What do you think? Agree, disagree? Leave a comment. And as always, gå på marsch, Ukraine. Give them hell.